Well, this is Dr. Dawn Sears, GutGirlMD, and I am so happy to have Dr. Amelia L here with us, DO. She is from This Osteopathic Life, and she has an active podcast. She has an active coaching program, and she is just a force to be reckoned with as she cares for her patients and shares with the world the advantages of getting your care by an osteopathic physician. So I'm personally a huge fan of osteopathic physicians. 40% of the physicians in my gastroenterology practice are DOs. So Dr. Beakey, tell us more about the advantages of a patient seeing an osteopathic physician.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And that's so great to hear because sometimes in specialties, there is a much lower rate, of percentages of osteopathic physicians. And it'll be interesting to see how that changes as we've shifted how we're handling residency or that postgraduate training space. But for me, I'm from Michigan. And when I was looking to go to medical school, I really didn't know much about MD or DO. I had grown up going to an MD. He was fantastic. And I had the opportunity to shadow a husband and wife who happened to be an MD and DO partnership. And really interestingly, I identified more with the wife who was an MD, but just seeing those other letters, I'm like, well, let me learn more about that. And as soon as I looked it up, I thought, well, that just makes sense. Like, why wouldn't we all practice medicine this way? And we happen to have in Michigan at Michigan State parallel programs, right? So the MD and DO schools literally share buildings, share classes. And so it's really interesting to see what we had in common and then where some of those shifts happen. And one place was going into the OMT, Osteopathic Manipulative Treatment Lab, where we learn hands-on assessment, diagnosis, treatment skills, but also just in the philosophy that's interwoven into the learning all throughout to recognize the connection. And actually, as I've come through my training, the oneness, right, of body, mind, and spirit, they're not separate things. They're just different manifestations of the same thing. And the same in the body. We think about embryologically, right? We start as this small cellular structure, and then all of that becomes all the different parts of us. So they're not just connected, they're one part, again, that manifested in different ways, which is just so fascinating to me. Absolutely. And so when you're seen by a DO, ideally, you're seen by someone who's seeing that oneness in you and that wholeness in you and helping you figure out what things got in the way of your health fully expressing itself. And to me, that's the benefit of being seen by an osteopathic physician. And my big hope, especially with this single accreditation system for all those physicians when they graduate medical school, is that it'll be infused into all of medicine and not just be for DOs, but just a way to bring health forward for all of us personally, professionally, for our patients, and for ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I love one of the comments that you've had about health interruptions. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, the thing I always think about, and you've maybe seen the movie Love Actually, right? And in the opening, the reason the movie's named that is Hugh Grant, when he's narrating, it says, love actually is all around. And I hear that. And love to me is kind of a synonym for health. So wholeness, health, love, all of that. Health actually is all around. And sometimes if you're really sick, or you think about your patients who are not doing well and their gut is not happy and they're not processing and they're not absorbing food and they're weak and sick, they might feel very much like health is not here, and reminding them it's there, right? Even if it's like a little sliver and just a glimmer, it's still there, right? But we need to find out what's not letting it express itself, right? And that might be a virus, a bacteria, an autoimmune disorder, an obstruction mechanically, whatever it might be. But remembering health, we can't ever be away from health, right? And so I think that's one of the reassurances, and to remember that and say, okay, where is it? Kind of a scavenger hunt, like, where do I see the health? How do I highlight that? How do I remember that's possible for me? And then watch it expand outward from there.
Excellent. Well, you're talking about expression, possibilities, and what's always around us. So that just leads me naturally to coaching. And tell me about your coaching journey for yourself personally and how you see this being expanded to all institutions, all trainees, everywhere.
Yeah. And really, my coaching was born out of my medical practice. And what I realized the first day I was in a coach certification program was like, oh, I've been coaching this whole time.
Exactly.
So in medicine, like we're sharing here, my patients would often come to me for pain. My specialty is neuromusculoskeletal medicine and osteopathic manipulative medicine. So they would come with pain. They would want to know what was wrong. And they thought that I was fixing them. And none of those things really agreed with what I understood about medicine, about health, about humanity. But I also understood, why that was the experience. And so my work was always reminding them, well, here's what's working well. Yes. And this might be, again, interrupted and there might be obstructions and we're moving them out of the way, but it's your health, right? That's making you feel better.
Mhm.
And it was so interesting. So a year-ish ago, here we are, right in April now, 2021, my
Right.
clinic closed, because of PPE preservation order.
Mhm.
And I went to virtual, which was somewhat hard to make that leap for my patients who are very much used to hands-on
Right.
interactions.
Absolutely.
But we actually had the opportunity for them to see what role they actually did have in their care.
Wow.
So like, oh, it is me, and I do have a part. And even though I was there with them and facilitating, they began to realize how much power they did have
Oh
in
my
contributing to their own
goodness.
health. And so
Wow.
that was like,
Huge unintended
yeah,
consequence.
totally eye-opening for me, for them. And I thought, okay, first of all, I'm not limited, right? Like virtual is accessible to me. And I almost needed that physical pause for them to step back and say, oh, I don't just feel better because I come and you put your hands on and I leave and, we do that again a month later. It's like, oh,
Right.
wait, right? That's kind of a
Wow.
catalyst for my body, my spirit, my mind to do
Uh-huh.
what it's meant to do.
Uh-huh.
And so when we got to our first coach training, they said, okay, you're not supposed to like tell people what's wrong or fix them. You're supposed to tell them they have all the answers within. And I was like, okay, like, let's go, let's do this. And so that was really encouraging for me again to see kind of another door open, another
Mhm.
sphere where osteopathic medicine had a space, had a place,
Mhm.
was kind of
Mhm.
ahead of the curve in a way. And some of my physician colleagues, as we talked about, lots of physicians are entering coaching. And I
Right.
think it's a very beautiful and synergistic relationship. But sometimes it's hard because a lot of times in medicine, we're supposed to tell people what's
Mhm.
wrong and fix them and,
Mhm.
give them
Mhm.
a solution. And not there's any problem with that, right? Diagnostics
Mhm.
and
Oh yeah.
intervention,
Mhm.
amazing. But
Right.
at the same time, some of my colleagues have had trouble making that leap of not wanting to tell. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I'm good. Like I've been
Right.
waiting for somebody to tell me this is how we're supposed to talk to people. And
Mhm.
so coaching out of that, I really used the osteopathic tenets to kind of marry with coaching philosophy.
Mhm.
And I run my own CME program. It's 12 weeks in duration. I've had small groups around that 10 to 15 size, which has been really great to get to know one another.
Mhm.
And then what we realized was we could take this to a larger scale, bring that same framework with some tweaks to really match, institutional needs, and run it on a wide setting with a team of physicians trained as coaches. And so that's
Mhm.
where we moved to now. And
Mhm.
it's been amazing. We're wrapping up the 12-week program in one institution. And we just had a group call this last week. We teach a weekly session, and I've added a coach panel to the ending of it. And they're
Mhm.
usually 15 minutes. We were on for 45 minutes because it was just too much fun.
Oh,
As we just sat and
right.
looked and shared, and participants asked questions. And we had all specialties. We had men
Mhm.
and women. We
Mhm.
had all different cultural backgrounds, geographic locations, all sharing this wisdom together. And that's my real hope with coaching for institutions, is to break down those barriers,
Mhm.
to say, I can work in this academic center and you can work in that one. And we
Mhm.
don't have to keep it separate, secret, safe. It's like we can come together
Oh,
and
absolutely.
share in that synergistic way. And so that was, to me, this moment of, okay, yeah, we're on the
Oh,
right path with
a
this.
absolutely. So are you
Mhm.
seeing that the medical students and residents and trainees are getting just as much benefit out of those that are mid-career, or do you see a difference in the value?
Absolutely. And there's, different benefits at different stages. The students is a really rich space. And we have this great relationship with AMWA in the Ignite program, as we've been working a lot with students, primarily women in medicine there. And just seeing how we can plant those seeds early, again, how they can do the remembering sooner, right? There's been less
Right,
forgetting of who
right.
they were and all they can bring forward.
Mhm.
And especially for medical students, we think of all we did to get into medical school, right? All of
Mhm.
those activities, and you built up your
Mhm.
CV and your application, and then you kind of leave them at the door. But
Right.
instead, like, can we take those with us? And I
Mhm.
was just talking to a medical student this past week, and she blew me away. She was in a course where they were talking about it's not about what you know, but who you are and how you show up. And I was thinking, okay, yes, like so glad that this is happening at this level. And so they are seeing the benefit, although we also see that the people coaching them get equal benefit, right? Just like
Ah,
when we see our patients do
right,
better, we feel enriched and our health kind of meter goes up as well. And
right.
so that's an added benefit, and I see that with my coaches when they get to meet the students, we come back together and it's like, that was amazing.
Oh, I
They're
love it.
improving, but we're noticing it as well. But I will say we just stratified by years in practice, and that
Mhm.
5 to 10 years
Mhm.
is the most burnt out, right?
Right,
Has the highest level to
right.
start. And then,
Yeah.
of course, has the highest level of improvement. That range is so much more
Mhm.
significant. And
Mhm.
that's so critical, right? That time, because it is, you invested all of this time and
Mhm.
money and energy and
Mhm.
sacrifice from your family. And so I
Right,
think the expectations are quite high, you
right,
know, and then the system doesn't match it. And
right,
then we either leave, right? Or
right.
we're just so miserable. And
Exactly.
that's the population I think we have the most responsibility to really nurture investigate and care for.
Absolutely. Yeah. And HR will support that too, because that's when the most physicians leave, is between that 5 and 10-year mark. So that's a great point of focus of all of our efforts.
Mm-hmm.
Along those lines, we're seeing a lot more women physicians going into coaching. So at your experience, your institutions, are you seeing some men go into this as well?
To be coached or to be a coach?
To be
Mhm.
certified as a coach?
Yeah, it is interesting. And I will say in coaching for institutions, we're around 70 physicians trained as coaches who meet and collaborate and run these programs. And we had to actively go and recruit male physicians trained as coaches into that space. And it was a totally different experience, right? And you get to kind of cultivate that culture. And so it's in that ratio. So we're probably at like a 20% of having men physician coaches in that space. If I'm kind of, scanning through, even who was in this meeting previously, which has been a really interesting shift. And to have women take up the lead in that space and see how the culture expands. And I haven't seen, and you may know these numbers better, in the executive coaching space, I think it's even or probably more weighted toward men in that space.
Absolutely.
But in the physician arena with coaches, definitely many more women. And the men who are there do take up that task of listening to, like you said, medicine was designed by men for men. And that's gotten us to where we are. And now it's time to shift that evolution. And so they're pretty receptive to that collaboration, in having listening to women take the lead and partnering in the leadership in that space.
Right. Fabulous. So what is your plan, your wild dream in the next 5 years? What do you hope to accomplish?
Yeah, I'd love for coaching to be widely accessible at all stages of education, training, and practice. So we're looking at medical schools, at postgraduate training programs. Medical associations is a really interesting space. I mentioned AMWA and the same, state medical associations really have an interest in serving their members. We all pay these dues, right? We think, I don't quite know what I get for this. And so having some tangible benefits in the way of coaching, whether it's a discount or an automatic program, whatever that is a really key space. And then for all physicians across institutions, again, what is your wellness program? What is actually happening there? And can we bring you some tangibility to that space? So that's my hope. It's not the exception. It's not this, I don't know, should I have a coach? It's just like, it's here. It's a resource. Everyone has access to it because we have this amazing inherent capacity, but again, we lose sight of it. Things get in the way, and coaches can help you remove those obstructions. So I'm working in different avenues, going to, the AOA, the AMA, AACOM, the ACGME, like how can we get some big yeses so that it isn't having to knock on every door, although we'll knock on lots of doors. That's not a problem.
Right.
And then also working with the Wellbeing Index, so we go there to say, if we can demonstrate this, and again, they're partnering with institutions to create programs. So seeing where we can partner on a broad scale to just normalize this, right? Burnout, unfortunately, has become normalized. And so let's normalize now this proven antidote to burnout.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that if we currently have burnout as the normal state, having a coach should be the normal state. Which physician should not have a coach?
Yeah, I think none of them. I have a bunch.
Exactly. That's the key to success. So how can people find you to learn more about what you're engaged with, what opportunities there are, and how to work with you going forward?
Yeah, so coachingforinstitutions.com, right? That's the website, and you can see coaches on there. There are profiles. You'll see the programs that we have available. You'll see resources and articles, also a menu of topics you might think, I don't know why I would use coaching. And so we list all the reasons. And like you said, who should have a coach? You can have a coach if you're struggling. You can have a coach if you're doing amazing, right? So level up. You can have a coach in the middle. We often neglect the middle. So if you're doing okay, right, have a coach. It's always good to have somebody partnered to give you a different view in that space. And I always think about that middle of the bell curve sometimes doesn't get a lot of the attention. And then for This Osteopathic Life, just that name, that's the website. You can do This Osteopathic Life at Gmail, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on YouTube as well. And I have a podcast that you could find most podcast places, working on getting that to all platforms. But yeah.
Yes. The podcast is great. You not only do reflections on where you are mentally, emotionally, mindfully, but you also do some great interviews, which has been a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, it's been great hearing from other people how osteopathic tenants come up in their life, even when they're not noticing them, right? So they're at play, even if we're not totally aware of them happening.
Right, exactly. All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, this is great.